with high-profile policymakers, think tanks, climate and environmental scientists and professionals in the local and international green economy development space. My name is Emmanuel Etaderi. I am the Executive Secretary of the Financial Center for Sustainability, Lagos, and I have with me here my colleague and co-traveler in the quest to develop and build a new green economy that is climate resilient and sustainably developed in Nigeria. Mr. Bankole Olorotoba. Bankole, take it over from here, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Am I audible enough?
Yes, you are.
Am I audible enough? Okay, great. Thank you very much, everyone. Welcome to today's fireside chat. It's been a while that we have been hiatus, if you ask me. But again, there was need to gather as much content as possible, and also to be aware to be sure if the need to share knowledge is still valid in the course of finding new knowledge within the green economy space. My name is Bankole Olorotoba, as my co-host Emmanuel has said, and we'll be having a very wonderful time with two people who today we just found out have a deeper relationship than we thought they had, in terms of mentorship and guidance and work relationship. So it's going to be a series of conversations that we will be sharing today on a topic called Only One Earth: How to Encourage Living Sustainably in Harmony with Nature. We know that nature-based solution has been, an issue around the world, but the need to also understand the conversations around issues like this is something that not many people are clear about. So our two guests today will be doing a very good justice to what we have. So I've got with me here, first on our list, I've got, let's go ladies first. I've got Dr. Temitope Shogbamu. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Nice to be here.
How is the day going?
Fine, thank you.
Just before, I share a little bit more about who you are. Can you just do us the honors of just telling us a little bit about yourself and also the topic, and then I can introduce our next guest.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon or evening, wherever you may be joining us from. Temitope Shogbamu. I'm an environmental toxicologist. I lecture at the University of Lagos, and particularly within the context of the topic for this discussion today, I am the lead for evidence use in environmental policy making in Nigeria project. And I also lead a research group called Environmental Evidence Synthesis and Knowledge Translation at the University of Lagos. I'll be sharing more a bit about my practical experiences facilitating interactions between stakeholders in the evidence ecosystem space with respect to environmental management across Nigeria and indeed across Africa. I've been working in this space for roughly about a decade now, and like you earlier mentioned, I've had the honor of working with Dr. Eugene Itwa, and indeed he's one of my mentors. So this is a very excellent honor to be on the same platform with him. And we both have the same passion with respect to environmental sustainability. So we've worked together here and there. And so that's all I'd like to say for now. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Shogbamu. And so you've also let the cat out of the bag. So our next guest is Dr. Eugene Itwa. So Dr. Eugene Itwa, we've worked, ever since the NCIC started. Also, he has been with the FC4S. He's the person that, his long resume, I don't think it will take us about half of this session for us to talk about Dr. Eugene. But Dr. Eugene, thank you for coming. Please tell us a little bit about yourself before, and also about the topic before we get started.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bankole, and indeed Mr. Emmanuel, for putting this together. It's an honor to be here. My name is Eugene Itua. I'm the CEO of Natural Eco Capital, an organization that supports stakeholders in both the public and private sector with eyes on the emerging issues of sustainability. We talk about circular economy today. We talk about climate change, and indeed, we talk about natural capital, which we'll be emphasizing today. How can we live more sustainably with nature? But we take it from that flank of natural capital. Just to quickly let you know that I also serve as the coordinator, national coordinator in the development of Nigeria's long-term low emission development strategy. Earlier, I led a team to develop a long-term vision that we call LTV 2050, which was submitted to the UNFCCC earlier by our country. I am the regional convener or coordinator for the West Africa Capitals Coalition Hub. It's designed to create community of practitioners that scales the application of capitals approaches in a specific context, whether for national or sector-based. You can actually Google Capitals Coalition. It used to be Natural Capital Coalition. So we now have amalgamation of the capitals. So we have Capitals Coalition today. I'm also the thematic lead on circular economy and natural capital under the Sustainability Policy Commission for Nigeria Economic Summit Group. Just in April here, I ended a position as the policy and advocacy coordinator, natural capital in Africa Development Finance project. That project, just to let you know, is a joint initiative by the African Development Bank and the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership. And the implementation is led by the Worldwide Fund for Nature, with oversight by a joint implementation committee made up of different bodies that you know. That program or project aims to mainstreaming natural capital approaches in African development finance. So I have supported them, taking them to a level. And interestingly, we're all talking about the Climate Change Act 2021 for the country, our country, Nigeria. Just to let you know that I was the co-head of the technical committee that revised the climate change bill, which is now law. Earlier at the 8th Assembly, I was actually the chairman of the technical committee that prepared that bill that the president did sign because of 3 reasons. Don't bother yourself with the 3 reasons. He has signed it now. And so everybody's talking about it. So let me just stop there. But specifically on this aspect that you want me to speak on today, talking about natural capital, just to let you know, much earlier, and I think that was when Saraki was the chairman. There is this committee on environment. He was the chairman at the Senate. I have supported Global Legislators Organization for a Balanced Environment in developing a tool for the country back then that was submitted to, back then they were called World Summit of Legislators. So it supported them back then. And not too long ago, I also supported that same organization, Globe International, and of course, Globe Nigeria, to develop a diagnostic study or report on the implementation of environmental economic accounting. So there's so much to say in this direction. Just to thank you for bringing me on board to talk on some of these issues.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Eugene. That was, I couldn't have said it better. I likely would have been reading, quite a long list, and I could see that, Dr. Shubham also is also excited to hear your voice this morning, just as every one of us here. And so there are tons of knowledge that we think that we need to share and as well learn from each other this morning. And I will let my colleague, Mr. Emmanuel Etedere from the FC4S League,
to tell us more about the topic and as well, get us involved in the
Okay, thank you very much, Bankole. Just a bit of technical glitches there. I hope we can sort that out. We weren't hear you towards the end of your intervention, so maybe you want to check with the tech guys. But thanks to the two special guests for the incisive introduction and the detail about the reason we're here today. I'll just add a little bit of color to it. We know that June 5th every year is celebrated internationally, globally as the World Environment Day, and this is led by the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, and whose office Dr. Eugene is well sat far away in Eastern Africa today in Nairobi. And the reason for celebrating this is to, provide a vehicle for encouraging awareness and action by everyone concerned on the need to protect the environment. We all, as human beings and living organisms, depend on the environment for food, for shelter, for resources, for all sorts of nourishment, and to enable us prolong our stay here on Earth and to live sustainably. But we need to know how we can live sustainably in harmony with nature. When we start discussing some of the key questions, you understand the reason why it is essentially important and vitally necessary to live in harmony with nature. There's no one alive today in the world that did not pass through a traumatic period last year or last 2 years because of man's interference with biodiversity and with the setup of nature. And some people curiously intervened or interfered, and we came out with a pandemic that almost wiped our confidence of living, not just the people of the air, but the fear of the dread of the fact that we could actually become extinct by a disease that had no known origin, no known cure for a bit of period, for a while before the scientists brought up the vaccines that people started taking. So I think it's behoving of me to set the dice rolling. If Bankole will permit me, I can just maybe start asking our guests so the key questions. And the way we've arranged it, would ask the guests interchangeably the questions, but there are one or two common questions they can respond to from their viewpoint. Maybe we should start with those common questions. The first one says, only one Earth. And this was a slogan for the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment way back in 1972, exactly 50 years ago. Do we think anything specific has changed and in terms of our appreciation of the fact that we really have one Earth? I know I've said this before recently. Mr. Elon Musk is preparing to take people to another planet. He's preparing holiday trips to some other planets within the universe. Good for him and those who can afford it. But as far as we know, the only planet that is very comfortable for human existence now is this Earth. And that is why in 1972, that slogan came out, only one Earth. Do you think we are fully aware of the importance and the gravity of this slogan? What has gone wrong? What could we have done better? Why is it important at this time? Dr. Eugene, take a stab at it.
Thank you very much for that very question. Well, I think so much has actually changed. Just to say that today we're talking about this. And that has changed in terms of the level of awareness that we now have. In terms of the actions that we all are clamoring for to ratchet up. In terms of laws being created. in terms of organization, administrative structures being created, in terms of getting more and more stakeholders involved. But the question is, in all of this, to what extent have we gone? Yes, just only some few years back, recall that the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, which is more like an equivalent of the IPCC, has said that we are losing so many species. It was emphasized that people are putting nature in more trouble than ever before. With extinction looming over 1 million species of plants and animals. So for me, I would say the light of all this, have we really done honorably? I would say no. We need to really take a number of these statements we're making more strongly in terms of the actions we're putting up. Humans are unwittingly choking the living planet. And of course, we're also for it as humans. We have reconfigured dramatically life on the planet. You just talked about the COVID, the onset of COVID, and we're talking about monkeypox. So it's been a terrible situation. If I must say, we are not just talking about plants and animals, but we are talking about preserving a world that is becoming harder for us as humans to live in. We are threatening the potential food security. We are threatening water security. We are threatening human health and the social fabric of humanity. And in all of this, you also want to know, we are now looking at the economic and security issues as people and countries will fight, and indeed we are not already fighting over scarcer resources. The poorer nation, the developing countries, of course, will feel the burden more. So for me, have we done so well in terms of action? No, but in terms of statement, in terms of pronouncement, we have done very well. But in terms of action, we need to do more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eugene. You landed on a very solid note. Words, excellent. Action, we're not there yet. Dr. Temitope Shugbamu, what do you think? Have we done well? What could we have done better? What exactly went wrong? Excellent words that could have moved, and mobilized humanity towards action. Only one Earth.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Etadehi. Without repeating some of the comments by Dr. Itwa, which are actually right, I'd like to say that a lot has changed really in the last 50 years. The truth is that the human population, the global human population 50 years ago is not what we have now. So you can, and the Earth's size in terms of land space has really not increased. And in order for the human population to be able to maximize the use of the space that it has on Earth, it has indeed, in the means of trying to develop, actually impacted the environment more. And that's why we're talking about now is extreme urgency to take urgent action for climate change, because the increase in temperature over the last century has actually been higher, and the forecasts are much more potentially devastating. But I'd like to say also in the last 50 years, we have actually had an increase in human knowledge and capacity. So now we talk about the fourth industrial revolution. We talk about things like artificial intelligence and machine learning. These capacities and capabilities have helped us to be able to forecast much more better and truly understand the state of the environment and indeed the state of the Earth. and so help us to make informed decision. I work in the EIDM space, evidence-informed decision-making space. So we always talk about making informed decisions underpinned by science. What is actually the evidence that is on ground. But in terms of stakeholder actions, in terms of mobilizing people and getting more people aware about this, I mean, the advent of social media, we talk about the global village, even the people in the village now know about things like climate change. And it's not just because people are feeling the impact physically or directly now, but there's a lot of awareness to out there. But the real question, like you asked, is the action commensurate with the level of awareness that has been generated? Unfortunately, no. I mean, as an environmental toxicologist, and what that means is that I look at or study the effects of harmful substances. So substances that can be in the air, that can be in the water, that can be on land, that can cause harm, not only to humans, but to other living organisms like plants and animals. In the last 50 years, we have had emergence of what we call emerging pollutants. So we now talk about plastics, right? And plastics is gaining so much attention, in fact, at the same par with climate change. 50 years ago, it wasn't really an issue. So you would see that there's a almost direct link with the increase in human population and these emerging issues, together with the underlying issues that we have bemoaning the earth 50 years ago. So indeed, there's been an increase in knowledge production, but then there's also been an increase in other potentially exacerbating pollution issues, which really exacerbates climate change and other harmful issues that we see affect Earth generally. We now see a lot of young people. So I'm young myself, so I work with a lot of young people and young advocates for the environment, getting more involved. But I think that we have more of that now in developed countries, and developing countries are just trying to catch up. So now when we talk about developing countries, who are not necessarily the polluters per se, or who have caused the underlying pollution leading to climate change, and we need a lot more knowledge. We need a lot more advocacy to bring up these young people, because when we talk about sustainably using the planet and environmental sustainability, we really cannot leave anyone behind. And so these young persons from the very elementary age, and I'm focusing now on developing and underdeveloped countries, need to be carried along. So those are some of the actions that we need to put in place. We have laws, we have regulations, those have been there, and we've had more. In terms of definitive actions now, we really need to look at things that would ensure that no one really is left behind.
Thank you very much. Bankole, you can take it from there. Bankole, can you hear us?
Hello, Dr. Demitokwe. The network seems to be all right.
Oh, I hope you heard me.
Yeah, we heard quite a bit. It was really breaking at the final part of the conversation, but we got, I think what you shared from all what you said is sort of what is leading into what this next question is going to be. If I can pick up a few points from what you said around, youth, around what we've done so far, what are the actionable, steps that have been taken, if we've tried enough to take some of those steps, and also how sustainable are those steps, that we've also taken. So taking from the points you've made, I would like to ask Dr. Eugene, right? I know you've worked with a lot of governments, multilateral, institutions like you're currently doing now. Do you think that there's a deliberate action from all of our activities, putting into, also roping in our usual suspects, government, private sector? Do you think that we have, there's a deliberate action from our side that indicates that our current demand on natural resources will be sustainable? Do you think that it is something that we are being deliberate about?
I would say yes, but let me just take it from the foundation, looking at it from this very program, this fireside event. Is it a deliberate action to create awareness, to build on what people have known, to see the kind of action we can collectively take? I would say yes. Just take it from that, this small stakeholder engagement. There are wider stakeholder engagement, like what is happening here now in Nairobi. Looking at the post-2020 biodiversity framework, how the entire world can collectively bring up actions that can be implemented. So yes, there are deliberate actions to see that we make what seemed to be unsustainable to be sustainable. But again, we want to understand that the earth is designed to be sustainable. The earth can replenish itself. Left alone, the earth will continue. Did you notice that when we stayed at home without interference, those areas you thought would never grow grasses, plants, and so on and so forth, they were not growing? When, the shutdown of the entire economy of the world, people stayed at home. There were areas that grew. In fact, in some areas, animals were coming out. Animals that you and I actually drove away. They were not coming out. So in other words, left alone, the earth itself is sustainable. But unfortunately, what we have done appears to make the earth to be unsustainable. No wonder we're saying we have just one earth. Let's not continue to abuse it. Let's see how we can live sustainably in harmony with nature. The nature that we have put our fingers into its eyes. We say, let's pull that finger backward. If we pull it backward, then it will be of interest to all of us. And I think looking at business as usual has been a disaster as far as the entire world is concerned. But looking at it, we are not saying stop business as usual. Let's pull back. The key to remember in all of these things is that the trouble the earth has is not a terminal diagnosis. It's not a terminal disease. Because if you and I stop, the earth will replenish itself. And indeed, if we support the earth by restoring, by planting, and that's what we talk about tree planting, for instance, it will blossom. And who enjoys it? You and I. So generally, talking about the entire world coming together, multilateralism or whatever you call it, encouraging government to do this, encouraging business entities to do this, encourage civil society and so on and so forth. If we are able to do what we should do, certainly, the earth will remain sustainable. But our sustainable behavior appears to make the earth unsustainable. So we're not saying, oh, we want to live sustainably. We want to do things sustainably. In fact, sustainability has become a buzzword for everyone. It wasn't so yesterday, it's so today. Because that awareness has been created, that we must take some level of action to ensure that what all of us are doing, we apply the brake. And indeed, just to reemphasize, now is the time for us to hit the brakes on nature destruction. Now is the time to put the pedal to the metal towards a more sustainable future for natural resources. Otherwise, our well-being and the well-being of nature itself will continue to be in the state we continue to describe it. We must no longer look in terms of policy decisions, in terms of business choices. We should not overlook ecosystem. Granted, our ecosystem has the capacity to restore itself and maintain its own integrity. But our continual abuse will make it look as if the earth itself is not sustainable. So in other words, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm driving at is that the earth itself is sustainable, but our behavior is making it look as if it is not sustainable. So in other words, it is human behavior that is wrong. It is human attitude that is wrong. It is human practices that is wrong. All of this, we need to stop. You will say, what goes around comes around. The earth is intricately interwoven. And you will say, if you touch one domino, dozens of others will fall. Because it is intricately interwoven, you cut one strand, dozens of others will unravel. So if we do not stop, what is happening in the developing world will affect the developed world. What is happening in the developed world will affect the developing world. So nowhere to hide. And interestingly, the entire earth knows no frontier. And that is why, even if we have country boundaries, we still talk together. We still see how we can collectively talk about actions that will make us to have that sustainable living. Let me put it that way. So ladies and gentlemen, the key element here is to allow the earth to be. While we're developing, we want to develop in a manner that will not jeopardize human living. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eugene. That was quite an introspective, response to that question. And interestingly, like you said, during the lockdown, we had dolphins on the coast of Lagos. There were different species of marine life that was also visiting at different parts of Lagos, and it was quite interesting because many people never thought that you could find dolphins around the coast of Lagos, but then here we are. So let me jump also to Dr. Shubham. So Dr. Shubham, you are a well published and award-winning academia, and also a promoter of evidence, right? Evidence-informed decision in environmental management. So can you just let us in on the kind of experience you've had, in advancing the cause of human activity-based pollution on environment? What has your experience been so far?
Okay, so I'm actually not advancing human activity-based pollution. I'm hoping to mitigate it. Yes, so when we say human activity, we call it anthropogenic in our scientific world here. And so what our aim is, so even though I'm a toxicologist, I look at the effects. My aim is not to advance it. So I just needed to correct that, is to mitigate it and eliminate. Yes, so what have we been doing? Thank you for the question. So permit me, I introduced the HUPIN project in my introductory note. It's called the Evidence Used in Environmental Policymaking in Nigeria project. It's a project that I conceptualized in 2019 with funding from the African Institute for Development Policy. And really, why did this happen? So, like I said, I've had varied experiences. I've worked in the oil and gas sector. I've worked in environmental consultancy. I now work in academia. And in all of these experiences, I've also had privilege to be on panels with the Federal Ministry of Environment to review environmental impact assessment reports. And I discovered that there was a very wide gap, lacunae, between we researchers, we call them the evidence producers, and those who are making the decisions, the policymakers, right, the practitioners, and the people who are in between the brokers. And I realized that for we researchers, most of the time, we just get published in scientific journals that are really not accessible or utilizable by these policymakers to make decisions. And so if we're really going to make the kind of impact that we want to have in order to achieve the world that we want, particularly an environmentally sustainable world, we need to close that gap. We need to come together. And that's why from 2020 till now, we've been facilitating a lot of stakeholder engagement and interactions. We realized that there's need for training on both sides, really, because a lot of we evidence producers don't know how to communicate the evidence that we have, which we know is required in order to bring about the decisions that will make the impact that we want to see. And the policymakers also don't understand the technical jargons we wrapped about and the figures in order to be able to make the decisions. And then we also have in between the political shenanigans, and this is not peculiar really to developing countries. Even in the developed world, we have political issues that underpin or sort of fight, hand in hand to gain prominence in terms of decisions that are made. So we've been engaging stakeholders. We presently work with 3 environmental regulatory agencies in Nigeria. And we also have True Mind Network with the African Academy of Sciences and some environmental professional societies. We've actually been closing that gap intentionally. And in doing that, we're also seeing some other needs. For instance, now we're advancing what we call the Environmental Evidence Portal for Nigeria. And that's because one of the greatest needs of the policymakers is that they don't have this data that they need to make informed decisions. So if we say that we have a problem about plastic pollution in Nigeria, how much of it do we really have? And if you know about the indicators for the UN SDGs, you cannot really say you are addressing an issue if you don't have numbers. And we have a dearth of that numbers in Nigeria, and not only in Nigeria alone, but we're taking it a step at a time. So we're advancing that with what we call the EPON project, and we are working with all stakeholders in the environmental evidence ecosystem in order to be able to achieve that. And what we want to do with that is not just to put the data out there. We want you to see the trend. We want to be able to say, okay, what's actually the true status of this issue? If you're talking about greenhouse gas emissions across Nigeria, yes, what is actually the true numbers? What are the specific emission sources? It is when we have those exact numbers and figures that we can now design informed and targeted interventions. Interventions cannot be done in a blanket way. And so in EIDM, we talk about contextual use of evidence. So what will work in Nigeria might not necessarily work in Kenya, because our peculiarities are different, our cultures are different, the perception, the risk perception of the people in those climes are different. The same thing, what works in the developed world is different from what works in the developing world. And so we continually learn as we go, and we always have to, in concert with the evidence, look at these other peculiarities in making the type of decisions that we make. And it's not in making the decisions alone, it's ensuring that they are implemented and enforced along the line. And that's why I always talk about, carrying the young ones along, because in a few years' time, a lot of the old ones who have put these things in place will go, or they will not have the energy to continue. If the young ones are not carried along and they don't know what we're talking about, we are probably going to have a earth that is worse off than where we started. And so we need to include and intentionally make inclusive young people in these decisions-making process, in these stakeholder engagements, so that they can carry forward and also develop the capacity to be able to achieve the earth that we want to achieve, an environmentally sustainable world. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Temitope. And I like the place you landed. You spoke to the young ones, the youths, and I wish we'll have many more Greta Thunbergs of Nigerian origin. I'm yet to see a Nigerian Greta Thunberg, the teenager who has rocked the world of climate change and has been dominant in terms of pushing for reforms over the last few years, in spite of being just a secondary school student. I think she started from the tender age of about 12 or so, and she's still going strong. Where are the Nigerian Greta Thunbergs, the Nigerian kids that will champion the space? That's what Dr. Temitope Shugbamu is saying. I will move now to Dr. Eugene Itwa and ask you very simply to perhaps throw some light on the importance of natural capital accounting and its importance to environmental sustainability and economic development. This is not something many people are familiar with, but if you be kind enough to give us some insights, because I perceive you are the expert in this space. Dr. Eugene.
Thank you very much. One of the things I didn't talk about earlier was one of the things that we had developed for Nigeria much earlier. So that those of us here, if you have access to the Nigeria Governors Forum, perhaps they can bring back that idea here. I want to take it from that angle. We had developed indicators and benchmarks, as well as guidance notes. I developed the environment sector. There was for agri, finance, and so forth. And it was a peer review mechanism for states. It was supported by DFID back then and the Nigeria Governors Forum and State Partnership for Accountability, Responsiveness, and Capability. The idea was to get all the state governors peer review themselves. I think it was patterned after Africa peer review mechanism. So for those of us that are very close to the state place, they can actually bring back this. And in talking about natural capital, you and I have, we used water today. We get to drink water, we get to eat food. We're taking air. Just think about the resources from the earth that you take delight in using. Natural capital refers to the element of nature that produce value, whether directly or indirectly to all of us. The concept of natural capital includes non-renewable resource stocks and renewable natural resource flows. And indeed, the ecosystem that provide humans with vital ecosystem services. I just talked about water, for instance. The stocks of this renewable and non-renewable natural capital, you can also call them perhaps, some people will say natural capital assets, include soil, fresh water, farmland, forests, atmosphere, just name it, as well as the processes. The natural processes that underpin them, simply put. The flow of ecosystem services and benefit they provide can be very obvious. And I just talked about some of them. Food, fuel, clean air, clean water. What about recreation? Yes, just think about it. But unfortunately today, they are all at risk. At risk, for instance, if you look at it from the angle of biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation, we are harming nature through the various investments. This investment translates into substantial and pervasive risk for investors and for businesses, for all of us as a people. Are you looking at physical risk, transition risk, or systemic risk? All of this are part of the pervasive risk that we have seen today. And for those of us that want to perhaps understand the difference in all these elements of risk, if we look at the biodiversity risk element of it, let's look at physical risk. The loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services could be in form of degradation, ecosystem conversion, ecosystem degradation. What does it translate to? Think of it. We're talking about climate change today. Climate change is a manifestation that the earth is not healthy. The risk we are facing as a result of climate change is showing that the earth is not healthy. What about overexploitation? Pollution that Dr. Shobamu had talked about earlier. Invasive species. All of that can be associated with physical risk. And this impacts businesses. How? Are you looking at input scarcity? Higher or more volatile prices that we see today more than ever before? Disruption of production processes and value chain? What about the deteriorating operating conditions? Decline of site attractiveness, and then the need for relocation. You can also identify more as to how this impact business. In terms of transition risk, we're looking at the current and future regulation. We just talked about the Climate Change Act. And the Climate Change Act, if you check it, has also talked about nature-based solutions, for instance. The financing requirements, societal expectations, changing consumer behavior. When you now want to look at it from the business angle, it could come up in the form of project delays, increased mitigation requirements, restrictions, stranded assets that a number of us or a few talked about. Damage appear because your product is not meeting that element of sustainability. There's systemic risk, large-scale disruption to natural systems, economic and social crisis that we see and will continue to see because of the behavior that is leading to biodiversity loss. And then if you now want to aggregate all of this impact on finance, you now want to look at the assets and collateral that will be impaired. You want to now also want to look at the reduced profitability. There will be market risk, which will be losses on shares and bonds because of societal expectation. Credit risk, losses on corporate loans. What about liquidity risk? Refinancing constraints, and indeed operational risk, liabilities, reputation, legal costs, just name it. They are all there. For the financial institutions, just to say, and interestingly, the financial institutions are the managers of the flow of capital that fuels the economy. It translates directly into impact on finance that I just talked about. So in other words, financial institutions will continue to face escalating risk from nature loss if we do not stem what is happening today. This decline will create what we call material risk and interesting opportunities for banks, asset owners, asset managers, as they continue to invest in and lend to companies facing the increasing physical, market, regulatory, and reputational threats associated with biodiversity loss. So today, we must account for natural capital, which indeed will allow us to collect and systemize information on the stocks and flows of natural resources and trend over time. So in other words, natural capital accounting will help us to measure the stock of natural resources and flows of resources and ecosystem services that we just talked about as this support the economy. All of this aims to complement the economic indicators, interestingly, of the system of national accounts. Today, we're looking at GDP. And in some clients, these are already mainstream in their GDP. And they make contribution, try as much as possible to make contribution of nature to human welfare more visible in the accounting system. So we must mainstream natural capital within economic decision making, whether as countries, as development institutions, or even as businesses. And indeed, it is urgent. Mainstreaming natural capital is especially good for the financial institutions, like we just talked about. You fund significant activities that are destructive to nature. Think about it. In so many sectors, you do that. So you must be able to take into account nature in your decision making. Today we talk about circular economy. We talk about climate change. Preserving natural capital will certainly ensure a sustainable foundation for a circular economy. At the same time, a circular economy contributes to maintaining natural capital by reducing the environmental burden resulting from the use of material resources. Fighting climate change, saving species are equally important because we will continue to live in that vicious cycle if we do not bring this to bear. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, healthy and resilient society depend on giving nature the space it deserves. And for us to be able to do that, we need to see it from the angle of natural capital accounting because it enables us to provide that framework for a good decision making. EIA, Dr. Shugwami talked about EIA. EIA will look at projects. Oh, what are these projects? What are the activities? What impact will that have on that environment? But looking at it from the value angle, natural capital accounting approach will tell you, in addition to that, what value are we going to lose? If we say we are chopping down all these trees, in terms of its impact, in terms of value to us, to our well-being, how can you indeed bring this to be? So I think somebody has unmuted. Dr. Tusa, you want to unmute yourself, please? So ladies and gentlemen, like I've said, just taking it from that angle of biodiversity, we must take a decision that bring about natural capital in our decision making. It will help us to prioritize investment. It will help us to give technology a space that supports and protects our environment. Indeed, it will assist us to build resilience that will accelerate our path to net zero significance. So, ladies and gentlemen, there's so much for natural capital accounting approach. But can we adopt it? Yes, we can, because it will enable us to make better decisions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Eugene Itwa. Can I appeal to members of the audience to mute if they are not talking? Just mute your sound so that we can hear ourselves more clearly. We are running out of time, so we may need to accelerate our pace. I want to quickly dive to Dr. Shugbamu and to ask a question around, because she spoke, I really like the fact that she spoke to youths, and somebody within the audience also commended her for bringing the question home to youths. And when you speak to youths, you speak to people who are within the school age, those who are attending schools at the various levels of education, whether it's primary, secondary, or tertiary education. So my question is, there's been a capacity gap for expertise in the environmental sustainability space. It's perceived to be widening. Do you believe that schools' curriculums should be reviewed and updated to include this concept of environmental sustainability so that we can build the bench strength of professionals in this space? People like you and Dr. Eugene, you are scarce to find. I'm sure there will be more lecturers on sociology, economics, mathematics, accounting than we'll find in your space. But you are the ones teaching us how to live sustainably with nature. What do you think we should do in terms of school curriculums, in terms of building that bench strength or the community of experts in this space? Thank you. You're muted, ma. You're muted, Dr. Shugbamu.
Yes. Can you hear me now? Yes, thank you for that question. I just wanted to ask, do you want me to respond in terms of our context within Nigeria or Africa, or just globally, generally?
You can start quickly with a global perspective and bring it home.
Yes. Okay, so from the global perspective, like I said in my previous answer, the context really determines a lot of things. I can tell you, because I've had the opportunity to move around most of the continents, there is a lot more awareness from the younger age, even from the elementary age, concerning the environment in the developed world than in the developing and underdeveloped world. That is there. It's somehow part of the curriculum. It's part of what they learn. And it's not just about reading and writing, it's about actually practicing it. Okay, you practice how to, for instance, put waste into different, segregate your waste right from school. And you do this at home. And they're also supporting mechanisms and systems within those societies that support those type of actions. So let me come back a bit home to across Africa and in Nigeria. I think we need to take more strategic and intentional actions. Without trying to be biased, the University of Lagos, we pride ourselves at the University of First Choice and the Nation's Pride. And in my own department, at the Department of Zoology, we run a master's program in environmental toxicology and pollution management. And I can tell you, it is one of the very few programs that are highly subscribed by the University of Lagos, because we have a lot of people from different backgrounds actually coming into this program, and they don't get just theoretical knowledge. We actually teach them practical knowledge. And Dr. Itwa has been, we have been honored to have Dr. Itwa among other high experts, even people from like companies like Shell, and even the environmental government agencies like Federal Ministry of Environment and Lagos State Ministry of Environment come on one days of the lectures to actually give practical experiences to these students. And I'm happy that some of them are here. So in terms of capacity, we are making efforts in our own little way at the University of Lagos and my department. Another center of excellence that is coincidentally partnering with the Federal Ministry of Environment, called the Sustainable Environment and Social Inclusion Center at the University of Lagos, is also targeted primarily to actually build capacity intentionally in this area. And here they are targeting practitioners. But is that enough? Absolutely not. We need a lot more, and not just within Lagos or UNILAG, but really across board. And not just only universities, but even secondary schools and primary schools. I'm aware that somehow climate change is part of the curriculum in one way or the other. But I think it's not just climate change, because that's not the only underpinning environmental issues that we have. Like I mentioned, we now have things like what we call emerging contaminants, like plastics. This has to somehow be inculcated, and coincidentally, it's part of the UN SDG goals, inculcated into our curriculum from the primary schools, even from the nursery schools. Can we get these children to actually learn? And you know one beautiful thing about young people, when you teach a child, you can be very sure that the whole family and the whole society, because the child will keep saying, my teacher said, this is how we do it in school. And so that way, you're actually able to carry forward knowledge beyond the book knowledge, but into practice right at home. And when it is practiced at home, it cascades throughout the society. So it has to be intentional in the curriculum, in advocacies, support more young people advocating environmental, sustainable, nature-based solutions, so that the awareness is much more out there, and involve them from the grassroots. We really cannot leave anyone behind. And this is globally now, not just specific to Nigeria and Africa. We really cannot leave anyone behind, because if we continue to talk about it and not take intentional actions, we are actually 50 years from now probably going to be talking about a worst case scenario with respect to environment here on Earth than we have now. So who are those to take these actions? It should start with governments. It should start with businesses as well. What type of programs are you supporting, right? You can support through programs that are tailored at these things. You can also support proposals where people are actually developing curriculum that inculcates these environmental sustainability issues and initiatives into their curriculum. You can also support governments that are trying to get these environmental sustainability issues into curriculum at the nursery, primary, and secondary school levels, as well as the tertiary. I know except for specific courses like the ones I mentioned at the University of Lagos, there are no general courses like you have general course in philosophy, general courses English, general course in mathematics, but there are no general courses per se that actually from year one, for instance, talks about environmental issues. Particularly, maybe we need to begin to think about that so that it's not only who are specialists trained in this area that are aware. Just like everyone, if you come in to study math, you come in to study medicine, you learn about philosophy, you learn about languages, you learn about the English language, you learn about maths. You can also learn about environment. And so at that level, it doesn't matter if you did not train as a biologist, as a toxicologist, you know the basic things about the environment and what you can do within your space. And in that way, I think we're going to achieve the kind of behavioral change that we want to see, which will cascade into this manpower that have been trained to go into businesses, which are main, producers of this kind of emissions and pollution that we're talking about, into government agencies who are the regulators, practitioners like environmental consultants, and people in different spheres, really. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Temitope. That was a very that was a good way for us to get to the closing of this conversation. We're already one minute ahead. Based on closing remarks, we'd like to thank everyone who has been with us, right from the beginning of this game, this conversation, and also to help us see that there is so much knowledge that needs to be shared around, the emerging green economy and also, climate-based economy in Nigeria. And it's good to hear Dr. Shogbamu also talk about this being in our everyday curriculum right from, right from time. The NCIC recently had a program, a hackathon program with youths in Lagos State in about 5 secondary schools based on a program called Students with Awesome Green Ideas, called SWAG. And it was amazing the kind of things that, junior school students were talking about, senior school students were talking about, the kind of crazy ideas that many of them wanted to show forth. And it also helps us see that the kids we think don't matter in this conversation really matter a lot. I would like to thank our guests for being, for the patience and the time, and also all of our listeners who have been with us from the beginning, for having the patience to listen through despite the break in technology here and there. But we think that this is a conversation that will continuously sustain. We've made it a monthly program, and we will continue to find other knowledgeable experts and also connect everyone else to deep insights around the emerging green economy in Nigeria. I would like to thank Dr. Shogbamu for staying with us. Dr. Itua, all the way from East Africa, thank you so much. We look forward to another wonderful, guest list for our next edition. But nevertheless, it's so unfortunate that we couldn't take a little bit of questions, but the conversations we have been seeing online, in the chat room, around commendations and, how this is resonating with quite a lot of people has been encouraging. We think that environmental sustainability is key. Private sector also has a very strong role to play here. Government has a serious role to play here. I believe that in the next government in Nigeria, there will be deep conversations around, green economy possibilities, climate challenges. We know that there's a climate change, there's a climate change bill that has been passed. There's a possibility for, an agency somewhere around here. And we also want to encourage everyone who's playing within this space to take time to shy away from greenwashing and thoroughly understand what some of the terminologies and some of the conversations around, climate change, climate mitigation, adaptations, and also green economy should be. All these are intertwined. The green economy is the economic perspective of climate change issues. And we believe that this can be a very functional economy in Nigeria that can create more jobs. We can see that in the renewable energy sector and as well in the circularity sector. On this note, I would like to say thank you everyone for paying attention. And I would like to call my co-host to quickly give a closeout before we leave. Thank you so much. Emmanuel, please drop a word in for us.
Thank you, Bankole. You've wrapped it up so in a very detailed and very concise manner. You've touched all the angles. So there's little for me to say, but to add to the thank yous to our esteemed guest, Dr. Eugene, the West African from East Africa, that joined us today. Thank you for sharing your time. Dr. Shugbamu Temitope, who is in my alma mater and who has done justice to the topic from an angle, both as an expert and as a symbol of the activism and the action of females in this space. Women are very strong in this space. I know because in all of the events I've attended at the NCIC and the ones we've done ourselves, we've seen a strong participation of women, especially in the creative and innovative aspect. You will not believe what women are doing in secularity until you visit some of the projects that I do together with NCIC and you see what they are producing. So we appreciate you, Dr. Temitope, and we thank every member of the audience, especially those who have left some very useful comments. And we encourage Ayo to put those comments together. They're part of the outcome of this session. They're very useful comments because I think there are a lot of experts in the room. Thank you for your patience. And as Bankole has said, this is a monthly series. We went into hiatus for a bit of a spell, but we're back. And we're back fully, and we'll like you to tag along with us as we x-ray these topics incisively from a point of view of knowledge and intellect. Thank you very much. And I'd like to also say that FC4S Lagos is committed to engendering that climate resilient green economy that will take Nigeria to where it's supposed to be within the Committee of Nations. In terms of all of the offsets that Dr. Eugene may have mentioned, the natural offsets that we have, natural capital, we're very rich in those areas. If the world really wants to save itself from the impact of climate change, visit Nigeria. We have natural offsets that can, if you go to whether it's to the south, the southwest, and we can also see the dangerous impact of climate change in Nigeria too, with the issues we're having with all the headsmen and all of that is as a result, I repeat again in all of our meetings, is as a result of climate change. So it's both, it's two-edged sword. We have the resources for the offset, but we're also feeling the immediate impact of climate change. So for us, it's a call to duty for every one of us. Thank you very much. And I hope I'll see you guys again, see everyone again. Thank you so much. And thanks to the background guys, Ayo and the NCIC backroom team. Great work you guys have done. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bankole, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Eugene. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, God bless you. Thank you.